was a cold and rainy night. The streets were empty, and most people were inside their warm homes. But David was not like most people. He was rich. Yes, a millionaire, in fact. But he was also alone. No wife, no kids, no family left. Only silence. In a big house filled with memories. That evening, David was driving back from a business dinner. His expensive car moved slowly through the wet streets. Then something caught his eye. At the corner of an old alley near a dumpster, there was someone lying on the ground. At first, he thought it was just a pile of clothes. But when the car lights flashed on the figure, he saw a hand. A small, pale hand. David stopped the car. He opened his umbrella and stepped into the cold rain. As he got closer, his heart began to beat faster. It was a girl. She looked no older than 18. She was shivering. Her skin was almost blue. She was thin, too thin. Her clothes were wet and torn, and her lips were barely moving. "Hey, can you hear me?" David said, kneeling beside her. The girl didn't respond. Her eyes were closed. Without thinking, David took off his expensive coat and wrapped it around her. He took out his phone and called an ambulance. While he waited, he stayed beside her, shielding her from the rain. When the ambulance arrived, they asked if he was family. David said no, but begged them to save her. At the hospital, David waited for hours at the hospital. Nurses came and went. No one had any answers. Finally, a doctor approached him. "She's stable," the doctor said. "She was suffering from extreme cold and hunger, but she's going to survive." David let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Later that night, the girl finally opened her eyes. David was standing near the window, looking out at the city lights. When he turned, she was staring at him with tired, frightened eyes. Where am I?" she asked softly. "You're in a hospital. You collapsed outside." "I found you," David said gently. The girl looked confused. Then her voice shook as she whispered, "Why did you save me?" David paused. He didn't know how to answer that. No one had asked him that kind of question before. "Because no one else did," he said simply. Tears rolled down the girl's face. She turned away, hiding her expression. "Who is she?" The nurses said she had no ID, no phone, no bag, nothing. When David asked her name, she hesitated. "Ellie," she said after a long pause. "Do you have any family, anyone I can call?" She shook her head. "I don't remember the last few days. Everything is blurry." David nodded. He had seen pain before, real pain. But this was different. Ellie looked like she had carried pain for years. David stayed with her for a while longer. Then he paid for her medical treatment before leaving the hospital. He didn't know why he cared. But something about her face haunted him. Before walking out, he noticed something. As Ellie adjusted the blanket, he saw a small tattoo on her wrist. It looked like a symbol, maybe a letter or a strange number. It didn't look like a regular tattoo. It looked marked. David's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The next morning, the next day, David returned to the hospital to check on Ellie. But she was gone. The nurse looked confused. "She left early this morning, before the doctor arrived, said she was feeling fine." David felt a cold shiver down his spine. "She didn't leave a message? A note?" The nurse shook her head. David walked out of the hospital with heavy steps. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Who was Ellie? Why did she run away? And why did that strange tattoo feel dangerous? He didn't know it yet, but this one act of kindness was going to change his life forever. David couldn't stop thinking about her. All night he sat in his big, quiet home, staring at the same chair, where he had placed his coat. The same coat he had wrapped around the homeless girl just yesterday. Ellie, that was her name. Or at least that's what she told him. She was so cold, so weak, so lost, and now she was gone. David had returned to the hospital early in the morning, only to be told she had walked out just before sunrise. No goodbye. No thank you. Not even a trace. He wasn't angry. He was confused. Why would she run away after I helped her, he asked himself, pacing the living room. He remembered her eyes. They held a secret. Pain and fear lived behind them. But also something else. Guilt. Tutti. Footage. David made some calls and used a few favors. Being rich had its benefits. By evening, he was in the hospital's security office reviewing the hallway camera footage. Here, the guard said. This was around 5:20 a.m. David leaned closer to the screen. There she was, Ellie, thin, quiet, walking slowly down the hallway, still wearing the clothes the hospital gave her. No bag, no coat, no shoes. Just a tired face and fast steps. But then something strange happened. As Ellie turned the corner to leave the hospital, the screen glitched. A blank screen. No signal, the monitor said. David frowned. What happened here? The guard scratched his head. That's weird. This camera was working all night. Only this file is corrupted, and only during the time she left. David felt a cold knot form in his chest. It wasn't just strange. It felt planned. Back to the alley, David couldn't let it go. Late at night, he drove back to the same alley where he had first found her. The rain had washed the ground clean, but the corner where she had collapsed still looked the same. Cold. Lonely. Forgotten. He got out of his car and placed a small bag there. Some food, a warm blanket, and water. Maybe, just maybe, she would come back. He waited in his car across the street, watching the alley. Hours passed. No sign of Ellie. Finally, around midnight, he gave up and drove home. But the next evening, when he checked the alley again, something was different. The food was gone, the blanket had been moved, and inside the bag, folded neatly, was a small piece of paper. David opened it with shaking hands. In small handwriting it said, "Thank you, but don't look for me." His heart dropped. That was her. No doubt, why run? Over the next few days, David couldn't focus on anything. Meetings felt boring. Calls annoyed him. Even his favorite food had no taste. His mind kept returning to one question. Why would someone be scared of help? She was starving. She had nothing. And yet she still ran away, as if she was hiding from something worse than the streets. He remembered the tattoo on her wrist. Small, strange, almost like a symbol. Was it just a design? Or was it something more? That night, David sat at his computer and searched tattoo symbols used by gangs, cults, or secret groups. His eyes widened. When one image appeared, it looked almost exactly like Ellie's, a mark used by a criminal organization, a dangerous one, a symbol used not for art, but for ownership. He leaned back in his chair, his face pale. Was Ellie running from someone or something? The decision, David stood at the window of his mansion, looking out at the city lights. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He thought saving a life would bring peace to his own, but it only brought questions. And now, it brought danger. Still, something inside him refused to stop. She was crying for help, he whispered, even when she didn't say the words. He picked up his phone, called someone from his private security team and said, "I need help finding someone." Quietly, because David had made a decision. He was going to find Ellie, even if she didn't want to be found. 3 days passed. David searched everywhere. He sent people to shelters, bus stops, and street corners. He asked quietly, showing Ellie's picture taken from the hospital's security footage. Some people nodded. Most shook their heads. No one had seen her. It was like she had disappeared into the shadows. David sat in his study late at night, exhausted, staring at the note she had left in the alley. "Thank you, but don't look for me." He read those words over and over, but he couldn't stop. Not because he was curious, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because something inside him whispered, "She's in danger." A shadow at the gate that night around 2 a.m. The security alarm at David's mansion beeped softly. The camera feed showed a figure standing at the outer gate, not trying to break in, just standing there. The guards checked the screen. Should we call the police? David had just come downstairs to get water when he heard the alert. He looked at the monitor and froze. It was her, soaked from the rain again, thin, cold, still wearing hospital clothes beneath a hoodie. "Ellie," David whispered, running toward the door, face to face again. He walked to the gate himself, waving off the guards. When he opened it, she looked up slowly. Her eyes were dark with tiredness. But this time, they didn't show fear. They showed shame. "You shouldn't have looked for me," she said softly. David stepped aside. "Come in, please." She didn't move. "I can't stay long," she said. "But I need to tell you something." David led her inside, gave her a towel and a blanket. She sat on the edge of the couch, looking down at her hands. "Why did you come back?" he asked. Ellie didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Because someone followed me and I didn't know where else to go." David's chest tightened. "Who followed you?" She pulled up her sleeve. The tattoo on her wrist was clear now, glowing faintly under the room light. A strange shape, like an eye inside a triangle. "I used to belong to them," she said quietly. "Who are they?" She didn't answer. Her body shook. David gently placed a hand on the table. "Ellie, you can tell me." But she stood up instead, and then she pulled a knife from her hoodie. The knife. David didn't move. His eyes locked on hers. The blade was small, but real. Her hand trembled. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "They said if I didn't come here and do this, they'd hurt the others." "What others?" "They have kids, girls like me. I escaped, but they caught me again. They said you're a threat now because you helped me." Tears filled. "No more running." Later that night, she sat by the fire while David made her warm soup. She finally started talking. She didn't know her full name. She had been taken off the streets at 14, promised safety, food, a place to live. Instead, she was marked, locked away, and used. "They don't let you leave," she said. "If you escape, they punish the others." David's jaw clenched. "Not anymore," he said. "I have people, I can help. But we have to be smart." Ellie looked up. Her face was pale but stronger than before. "I want to stop them," she said. "But I'm scared." David nodded. "So am I. But we're not alone anymore." For the first time in days, Ellie slept peacefully. She curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her face relaxed. No fear, no cold, just rest. David sat nearby in a chair, watching the fireplace quietly. He couldn't sleep. Not after what she told him. A gang that steals young girls. A mark like a brand. A secret group that punishes escape. And now, they knew who he was. The hidden file. The next morning, David called a trusted friend, Detective Harris, a retired police officer who had helped him in the past. "I need you to look into a symbol," David said. "And I need total silence, Riss." Didn't ask many questions, he never did. David sent him a photo of the tattoo Ellie had. Within hours, Harris sent a message. "It's real. They call themselves the Nest. No photos, no locations. But people disappear where they move, be careful." David's blood ran cold. He didn't tell Ellie right away. She looked better now. Clean, fed, dressed in soft clothes from his guest room. She even smiled once at the breakfast table. But David knew she was still running. A second home by evening, David made another call to his private driver. "We're going to the lake house," he said. An hour later, David and Ellie left the mansion in a black SUV and headed out of the city. The house was one of David's quiet places, a home deep in the forest by a lake. No neighbors, no cameras, no eyes. Ellie looked nervous. "Why are we leaving?" "Because I want you safe," David said. "And because I think they're watching." Her eyes widened. "You mean they know where you live?" David nodded. "Maybe, and I don't want to wait for them to come knocking." A safe moment. The lake house was beautiful. Wooden walls, warm lights, and tall trees all around. Ellie stepped inside and looked around quietly. "This is like a dream," she whispered. It's real, David said, and it's all yours. For as long as you need. That night they sat outside by a fire pit. Ellie told him more about the other girls, about a house where they were kept, about a man called the Keeper who gave orders. No one ever saw the real boss. Just the mark and the threats. David listened, face hardening with each word. I want to shut them down, he said. But they're too big, Ellie replied. Even the police are scared. David looked at her and said softly, then we'll be smarter than them. Someone was watching. The next day, David went to town to get supplies. He left Ellie with a phone and strict instructions to stay inside. But when he returned, he noticed something strange. Footprints. Not his, not Ellie's, but someone else's, around the edge of the trees behind the lake house. His heart pounded. He rushed inside. Ellie was safe, still sitting at the table reading. But he didn't tell her about the tracks, not yet. He needed a plan, and fast. The hidden device. That night, David went through the security footage from the camera on the back porch. He had installed it quietly earlier. At 3:12 a.m., the screen showed a figure, dark clothes, hood up, standing still for 5 minutes. Just watching the house. Then he turned and disappeared into the woods. David's hands shook. They had found them. No more waiting. The next morning, David sat down with Ellie and showed her the footage. She gasped. It's them. I know, David said, which means they're planning something. Ellie looked down. Her voice trembled. They won't stop. Not until I'm gone. Or worse. David looked her in the eyes. Then it's time we stop them first. The lake house was no longer safe. David knew it. Ellie felt it. Every creak of the wood, every rustle in the trees outside. It made their hearts race. Someone had found them, and that someone was watching, waiting. But David wasn't a man who ran from danger. He faced it. This time he was going to end it. The plan, we won't run, David said, standing at the kitchen table with a map and a pen. We'll set a trap. Ellie looked unsure. You mean make them come to us? He nodded. Exactly. And this time, we'll be ready. Ellie's hands trembled. But what if it goes wrong? David looked into her eyes and said gently, then I'll protect you, no matter what. For the first time, she believed him. The setup that afternoon, David made 3 phone calls, one to Detective Harris, one to a private security team, and one to a tech expert he trusted like a brother. Within 6 hours, the lake house was surrounded by hidden cameras, motion detectors, and trip sensors. The woods were wired. The windows were reinforced. A silent alarm would alert help within seconds. But the most important part? A fake David. In the living room, a dummy wearing David's coat and hat was placed on the couch. Lights on. Curtains open. It looked real from a distance. Ellie watched all of this from the stairs, quietly amazed. Will it really work? She whispered. David smiled. They think I'm just a rich man trying to help. They don't know I used to build traps for the military. The night falls by nightfall. The forest was silent again. Ellie stayed upstairs, hidden. David sat in the dark near the back door, wearing black, holding a small tablet. He watched the security feeds closely. Hours passed, nothing moved, until 2:41 a.m. A shadow appeared between the trees, then another. 3 men, dark clothing, no sound. They moved quickly toward the house. David's heart pounded, but his face stayed. Yemi pressed a silent button. The break-in, the men reached the back door. One held a crowbar. Another pulled out a small device, an electronic jammer. They had done this before, but they didn't see the small red dot on the tree behind them. The hidden camera. They didn't know that every move was being watched. One man opened the door. The silent alarm triggered. Inside, the dummy sat on the couch, just as planned. They moved in, slowly, silently. Then, the lights snapped on. A voice shouted from behind them, "Freeze!" 6 men stormed in. David's security team, armed and ready. The intruders froze. It was over in seconds. The keeper's message too were captured. One escaped into the woods, but not before being caught on camera. David stood outside, breathing hard, watching the police take the men away. Ellie stepped out onto the porch. "Is it over?" she asked. David shook his head. "No, not yet." One of the captured men was holding a phone. David took it and scrolled through the texts. There it was, a message sent just before the attack. "If you fail, she dies. You know the rules." The keeper. Ellie's face went pale. "They know I'm still alive," she said. "They'll come again." David looked at her and said firmly, "Then we'll go to them first." The air was cold, but Ellie was sweating. She sat in David's study at the lake house, her hands shaking. Across from her, David waited, quiet, calm, but focused. They had captured 2 men from the nest. One had already given a name, the keeper. But now David needed the whole truth from Ellie. "Tell me everything," he said gently. "No more hiding." Ellie looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure you want to know?" David nodded. "I have to." The beginning. Ellie took a deep breath. "It started a year ago," she began. "I was living on the street. My mom had died, and I had no one, no money, no food." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "One night, I met a man who said he could help. Said he had a place for girls like me, warm beds, clean clothes, safety." David leaned forward slightly. "And did you go with him?" She nodded. "I did. He took me to a house, big, quiet, outside the city. At first it seemed fine, but then..." Tears filled her eyes. "They took our phones. No calls, no visitors. They gave us fake names, and we weren't allowed to leave." David's jaw clenched. "Was the keeper there?" "Not at first," Ellie said. "He came later, tall, always wore gloves. We never saw his face without the mask. But we were told, if anyone ran, bad things would happen. And they did. The escape. One night I escaped through a broken window. I ran for hours barefoot in the rain. I didn't care where I went. I just wanted to disappear." David listened. Carefully, his hands were folded, but his knuckles were white. "Then I collapsed near that dumpster." "That's where you found me." David nodded slowly. "And the tattoo?" She touched her wrist. "The faded mark. The circle with sharp wings. It means owned." Her voice cracked again. "To them, I'm not a person, I'm property." David's heart ached with anger, but he didn't show it. "You're not property," he said firmly. "You're free now." But Ellie shook her head. "No, not until the keeper is stopped. And I know where he is." The map. David sat up. "You remember?" She nodded. "There's a second house, bigger, outside of town, past the old train station. That's where they take the new girls." David stood. "We go tomorrow." "No," Ellie said quickly. "You can't go alone." "I won't," David replied. "But we need proof, something real, something the police can't ignore." A risky plan. David made the call to Detective Harris that night. "We're going in," he said. "We'll get them red-handed." "Are you insane?" Harris snapped. "You're a businessman, not a cop." "I'm not just a businessman," David said coldly. "I'm someone who cares," Harris sighed. "All right, but you better not go without backup. I'll send you the address. Be ready." David ended the call and looked at Ellie. "This ends now." One more thing. That night before bed, Ellie walked out to the porch. David followed her silently. She turned and asked, "Why did you save me that day?" David paused, then said softly, "Because someone had to." She looked into his eyes. For the first time, she smiled, not from relief but from hope. "Thank you," she whispered, and for a moment the world felt quiet, but both of them knew it wouldn't stay that way for long, because tomorrow they would walk into the keeper's den. The sky was gray as David's black SUV stopped outside the old warehouse, just past the train station. Beside him sat Ellie, silent, pale, but ready. This was it. Inside that building was the man they called the keeper. Inside were girls just like Ellie, trapped, scared, forgotten. David looked at her and said, "We go in, get the proof, and get out. You sure you want to do this?" Ellie nodded. I have to. The hidden truth. The warehouse looked abandoned, but it wasn't. David and Ellie moved quietly, staying in the shadows. From a broken window, they saw a hallway lit by flickering bulbs. Voices, footsteps, laughter that didn't sound human. Ellie pointed. That door, behind it, the rooms. David held up his phone, recording everything. He slowly opened the back door. It creaked. They slipped inside. Down the hallway, Ellie froze. A girl, maybe 13, stood with a tray in her hand, staring at them. David raised a finger to his lips. Shh. The girl nodded, and with silent steps, she led them forward, face to face. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the main hall. Cold, calm, confident. Ellie, I knew you'd come back. David spun around. A tall man stood under the light. Black coat, gloves, a mask over his face. The keeper. David stepped forward. It's over. The police are on the way. The keeper laughed. You think I'm afraid? Of police, I own them. He looked at Ellie. And you? You were my favorite, such spirit, such fire. Ellie's hands clenched. You ruined lives. Not anymore. The keeper pulled out a small knife, but he wasn't aiming it at them. He held it to his own neck. If I go down, I take my secrets with me. David slowly reached into his coat. You already gave me everything I need, he said. He held up the phone, still recording. It had caught every word, every threat, every face. The final move suddenly, sirens. Dozens of lights flashed outside the windows, red and blue, loud commands, running feet. The police had arrived. The keeper tried to run, but Ellie was faster. She grabbed a heavy chair and threw it into his legs. He fell hard. David pinned him down until the officers burst in. Within seconds, the keeper was in handcuffs. It was over. Freedom. The police found more than they expected. 6 missing girls, fake documents, cash, weapons, cameras. Ellie sat on the steps of the warehouse, wrapped in a warm blanket. David sat beside her, silent for a moment. You did it, he said. No, she replied. We did. 1 month later, David stood on a stage in front of flashing cameras. Behind him, a sign read, Hope Haven, a new home for survivors. He spoke into the microphone. This shelter is for every girl who thought the world forgot her. We see you, we hear you, and you are not alone. The crowd clapped. Beside him, Ellie smiled. Strong, free, no longer afraid. Final scene. That night, as David locked up the shelter, Ellie handed him a small envelope. Inside was a photo. It was the 2 of them. On the porch of the lake house. Smiling, on the back it said, Thank you for saving me, but more than that. Thank you for believing in me. David looked up, eyes misty. Ellie walked ahead, laughing with the other girls. She wasn't the girl from the alley anymore. She was something more. She was home.